Okay, so I'm going to start off, and I just want to welcome everybody who's here for the long-awaited NASA Earth System Science Award winners webinar. Um, some of you won your awards quite some time ago, and thank you for your patience because not all the fairs happen at the same time, and we try to wait until they're pretty much all over. One thing I'd love to see in the chat is if you could identify where you're from and also if you are a student or a teacher, that would be great because or even let's take that back. What grade you're in or if you're a teacher. So I see Utah, grade 12, Ohio, grade 7, grade 12, New York, 11th grade, Virginia, 6th grade science, Minnesota. Okay, so we do have some high schoolers and some middle schoolers here, which is a good thing to know because we'll be talking about a variety of things. Thank you for sharing and continue to share. That'll be great. Without any further ado, we just really want to say congratulations on your award. We know that you worked hard, and it's great to see that we have people that are interested in Earth system science. And also, if there are teachers on here, just know that we also appreciate everything that you do to support your students in these efforts because we know it's a lot of work to do these projects. It's an extra thing to go to the regional fairs that's not part of the regular school day. And so we just appreciate all of the effort and the interest and want to give you a big, big congratulations. And I see we have a parent. That's awesome. So tonight we just really, this is kind of a casual thing, but I'm going to have you meet a scientist, and then we're actually going to meet a current intern and a former intern. And then we'll talk a tiny bit about internships and careers, and then open it up for questions. But hopefully we're trying to make this a little more interesting where we kind of tell a little bit about ourselves and how we got to NASA so that you can see that there are lots of different ways and lots of different opportunities. Next slide, please. Okay, so the scientist that we have here this evening is Jessica Taylor, and I'm going to pass it off to her.
Hello, everyone, and congratulations on your award. It's fantastic that you participated in the science fair and that you won the NASA Earth System Science Award. Congratulations, and thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Jessica Taylor, and I am a physical scientist at NASA Langley Research Center, and that's located in Hampton, Virginia. And I'm going to share a little bit about myself and also share a little bit with you about some of the NASA programs and resources that I think might be of interest. So a few things for me to share is that I mentioned a physical scientist. My background is in atmospheric science. So for college, I went to Florida State University. And I got actually a few different degrees. I got a degree in meteorology, in finance, and science education. I liked a lot of different things and could not make up my mind. And so I pursued multiple degrees. Some other things that are interesting about me is I have 2 daughters and I have 2 cats who are, ready? 18 and 17 years old are my cats. Yeah, I know. They're old little kitties. And outside of work, I love to dance and I love to go to the beach. When I was at Florida State University, I was in a Latin dance company and I used to teach Latin dance. And I grew up spending my summers in Mexico. My mom is in Mexico. She's from Mexico City, and that's where all of my family on that side lives. And so I had the opportunity to go there every summer, spend time with my family. But that really also, I think, helped me better understand other cultures, other communities, other geographies, other weather. There was so much that I got to experience by getting to spend my summers somewhere else. And Spanish is my second language. In school, I was a cheerleader. That is a picture of me in middle school as a cheerleader, and I did dance a lot. And one thing that is really interesting is that I struggled to feel confident in science. So I enjoyed science, I liked science, and I liked math. But I didn't necessarily um, feel like I was the best at it. Or, in other words, I wasn't always the one confident with my answers. If a teacher asked a question, I had an answer, I wasn't necessarily the first one at all raising my hand to give that answer. And so some of the ways that I helped myself gain confidence is by doing extracurricular activities and other things where I did feel a little more confident, like dance, for example, um, and also joining other clubs and volunteering to be part of leadership in those clubs gave me a lot more experience in talking out loud in front of students, also gave me more experience talking in front of adults. And so that's one of the things that I did to help myself build overall confidence. And then the other thing was that in college, I got to join a citizen science program. So let me share that one with you. And citizen science is a term that we use to just refer to citizenry in general participating in science. So non-professional scientists participating still in science by volunteering their time and talents. And in this case, I did something called the GLOBE program, where I collected data about our environment and particularly atmospheric science. So I was a student in meteorology, so I collected atmospheric data, and that really helped me build my confidence specifically in science. So through this program, I was collecting data. I better understood than any of my other student colleagues and peers in meteorology about instruments and observations because I did it every day. I took those measurements and I was able to analyze my data. I was able to ask science questions and I got even better asking those science questions and I got to share it with GLOBE, which is an international community. So one of my pieces of advice or suggestions for how I got to becoming more confident is by really trying out different things, not just in school, but in your extracurriculars, whether it's sports, whether it's any social clubs. I was also an active leader in my church to build some of that confidence for myself and then try on some other science like this through citizen science. And I will also share with you that link here in just a little bit for how you can find other citizen science programs that NASA has. Well, I had never necessarily seen myself working at NASA, and that's mostly because I didn't know about all of the amazing things that NASA did in Earth science. I grew up in Florida, which is the lightning capital of the world, and I really enjoyed lightning storms and got a chance to ask more questions about that during a research project in high school. And that's when I became interested in meteorology. I didn't really learn about all of the opportunities that NASA had in earth science until many years later, until I was in college. And this animation here shows you the NASA satellites that we have orbiting Earth. So NASA is known for space, right? And we use that vantage point of space to look back at the most important planet, our own home planet. And NASA, as a federal agency, is responsible and tasked with collecting data and monitoring the health and changes of our planet. Now, you'll see a lot of satellites on this list here, and many of them have multiple instruments on them. And they're all looking at different aspects of our Earth. So some of them are looking at the atmosphere, monitoring weather, and trying to track, make records long term to be able to say something about climate. They're measuring topography, the geography and landscape. They also study the hydrology, so they study the water. Maybe some of them also can do sea level rise, so the GRACE instrument is doing sea level rise, so that might be an area of interest to you. So all of these, we're looking at the Earth system, just like your award. We're looking at different components of the Earth system and seeing how they interact. And NASA really does have a huge role to play in Earth science, which is why we're so excited to bring this award to you. And thank you for your interest in doing Earth science. Now, because you have done such a great job with your projects, we wanted to share one particular resource that might be helpful to you in your future projects or other future questions you might have. And that's this quick start guide to find data imagery for student investigations. So we have a link to this that we'll be sharing. And this is just a little table that talks about the type of data you might be interested in. And it'll tell you where in the many different NASA websites we have, you can find that data at. So you can directly access that data through these different websites, but this kind of helps you decide, oh, okay, I'm interested in climate data, where would I go to find that? Or if I am interested in aerosol data in particular, where would I go to find that? So hopefully this will be helpful to you as you think about other questions that you have to investigate the Earth system, and feel free to share this with other students and your teachers as well. Now, I did mention to you about my experience in citizen science as a student and how important that was to me in seeing myself as a scientist before I ever became a NASA scientist. And one of those programs is the GLOBE program, and we have an app for that. So you're welcome to download with your families, download this app and begin collecting measurements about your environment. And if you're interested in something else, maybe you're also interested in astronomy, for example, this NASA Citizen Science website has a number of different projects that you can participate in to start learning about different areas that NASA's interested in, but really do more in engaging and being a scientist. So I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at this website as well. All right, so now I am going to pass it off to Kevin Ivey to introduce himself and share a little bit about his story.
Hi, everyone. First off, I just want to say congratulations on winning this award. It's awesome. And again, thank you for coming and listening to us tonight. So just a bit about me. So I'm a current intern for NASA, and I'm also a college student. So like all of you, I'm a student. I go to school, have classes. I'm actually a student at the University of Virginia. And just 2 weeks ago, I finished my third year of college. So I just have one left. And I'm also a math and computer science double major. So beyond that, it's just some fun facts about me. So 2 years ago for Christmas, my mom got me the Lego Coliseum for a gift. I'm still actually building it. College has kind of gotten in the way of that, but I like playing with Legos still. And then also just another fun thing that my family does is that, so we really like barbecue, except we're located in Virginia, which usually doesn't, if you think of Virginia, you probably don't think of barbecue. I don't know why you would. But one thing that my dad's really gotten into is that he found out that you can just order barbecue from Texas and they'll ship it to you on dry ice. So he's done that a couple of times, and we really enjoyed getting Texas barbecue in Virginia and eating it at home and not having to travel to Texas. And then just one other thing. So before this year, actually, during college, I had more virtual classes than in person due to COVID. Luckily, this year, most of my classes were in person, so that's changed, which I've been very, very happy about. I much prefer my in-person classes. But school the past couple of years with virtual, in person, and having to deal with all of that. So before I kind of talk about this slide, one thing I want to say, so my path to NASA actually started in high school. So in high school, I applied to a program that's run by the state of Virginia. That's called the Summer Residential Governor School. And through that, I was able to get, I think it was a 6-week internship through NASA. So I did a good enough job that the next summer they wanted me to come back. And I said, of course, I'll come back to NASA. Why wouldn't I? And that's actually the project I worked on that summer. So I was working for one of the programs that Jessica mentioned earlier called Globe Clouds. So what it is a citizen science program for anyone to go outside, take a picture of the clouds outside, if there are any, and say, I think I see these type of clouds. I think it's 50 to 70% cloudy outside, and here are some images. And then they send that data to us. So what we do is that we look if there's any of those satellites that are observing Earth overhead of that observation. And if so, we'll collect the data that the satellite measured, kind of pull it together, and then send it back to the user, which is really cool because you can see, hey, the satellite saw this, I saw this. You can look at the satellite image, and I really like looking at that. So one of the issues was that kind of the code that we had to do that was pretty old. So I kind of liken it to like an old car. So it was working still, had served us well, but as time had gone on, it kind of was causing more issues, had a couple of bugs, and it wasn't best for us to use it for too much longer. So what I did is that I updated it to a newer model, fixed some bugs, made it so that it worked better on our systems. So essentially, I upgraded our car. And then just one other thing I want to reiterate here is that it's a citizen science program that I'm working with. So the data collected can be by anyone. And then you get this cool satellite image and data back to you, which I know the first time I got back my satellite image, I was like, wow, like the satellite saw this, I saw this. I just really like doing that comparison. So here's actually one observation that I looked at in the past, which I thought was really cool. And it kind of emphasizes why we need people on the ground to take photos and take observations. Maybe thinking, well, what can I do that a satellite can't? NASA's spending millions of dollars on these satellites. They have all these instruments, super fancy. What am I going to do on the ground? So you can see kind of in the 2 images on the right that it doesn't really look that cloudy. You see kind of those high, kind of wispy cirrus clouds, but I wouldn't say that it's an overly cloudy day. But it's not what the satellite thinks. So there, one's from, they're 2 different satellites, but they both said that it's 100% cloudy outside, which you can see from those images, that's just kind of not the case. And the reason that the satellite said this is because there's ice on the ground. And the instruments have a hard time distinguishing between what's a cloud and what's ice. But you on the ground, you can look down and say, oh, I see that there's ice. You can look up and say, it's not 100% cloudy. So this is just one example of where we need people on the ground to actually kind of verify what the satellites are seeing. And then, so how I prepared for my career. So once again, I'm still a student, so I'm still preparing for my career. But one of the things that I did is that I learned outside of school. So in high school, I really wanted to take a computer science class. But my school didn't offer any classes in computer science at the time. So my junior year of high school, I got some book on Python, which is a programming language, and I taught myself Python. That ended up being huge for me, and it's kind of how I made my way to NASA, kind of my self-taught experience in Python, because that summer, like I said, I was interning at NASA, and I was using Python every single day, and a lot of my work was kind of revolved around what I taught myself. So learning outside of school was definitely huge. And then another thing is take advantage of school. Um, so I'm a math major, so I'm fairly into math. So one thing that I did in school is that I did a self-study in math when I was in high school. There were some classes I wanted to take, but my school didn't offer them. So I talked to a teacher that I had a fairly close relationship with, and I asked, "Hey, can I self-study these topics under you?" And he said, "Of course." And I did that for a year in high school. So kind of picking out in high school or just in school in general, this is what I want to do and seeing how I can make it happen. Or if you can't make it happen through school, what can I do outside of school? Those are two important things. And then another thing is participate in extracurriculars. So I rode crew in high school all 4 years, and that was one of the best experiences I had in high school. I had made a great group of friends, leadership experience. I had some physical outlet that was separate from any schoolwork, and it was just a great experience for me. And I just think having kind of those type of extracurriculars is definitely important. And then just kind of the final thing about how I prepared for my career. Like I said, I'm currently a college student, so I have about to enter my senior year next fall, and I'm a computer science and math major. And I actually finished my math major this semester, so all I have left now is computer science.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is Desiree Wilson, and I am a former NASA intern who currently works at NASA as a job. So I actually interned at NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia back in 2018. And now I work there full time as a scientific programmer. And so what that title means is that I work with computers for things related to science. And a scientific programmer could actually do so many different things, but my job mostly consists of making NASA Earth science data available to students like you so you can view it and study it. Here on this slide, I've listed just a few fun facts about myself. The first is that I grew up in a very small town in the state of South Dakota, and it was so small it actually only had one stoplight. And then the second fact I wanted to share with you is that I have a very sweet dog. Her name is Lucky, and I've actually had her since I was a teenager. And so when I was in high school, and she's 14 years old now, but we still have a lot of fun together. And then just to give you a little background about myself, as a student, I was pretty curious and I liked learning about science, and I was interested in math and science, but there were a few different types of classes that were kind of barriers for me in my education. So I really liked like biology, life science, and geology and environmental science, but I really struggled with some of the physics and chemistry, especially when I got to college. But many of those were required courses that I had to take, and they were very challenging for me. And the reason I bring this up is because in your long-term education goals, you may encounter some difficult courses along the way, and you should not give up because many of us have been there and really have had to challenge ourselves like that in order to reach our long-term goals. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about my background with NASA, how I ended up working here. While I was in school, in college, in my junior year, I applied for a NASA internship. And for those who might be unfamiliar with an internship is like a short-term job. You typically do them in the summer when you're on break from college, and it's an opportunity for you to gain some work experience in your field that you're studying. And so I ended up being selected for an internship with the MyNASA data team, which eventually turned into my job after I graduated. And I just really enjoyed my time as a NASA intern because it was just a really great learning opportunity to gain that real world experience. And with the NASA internship, you get to work on meaningful projects. These are projects that are important to NASA's missions. So it was a very positive, worthwhile experience. And I really encourage you to apply to internships throughout your college education, either with NASA or other agencies, organizations, and companies. All right, next slide, please. So now I'll just talk a little bit about the project I work on now and what the goals of that project are. So I work for MyNASA Data, and this program specifically works to help students learn about Earth science using authentic NASA satellite data. So as we've talked about a little bit previously in this presentation, NASA has a lot of satellites that are actually studying the Earth. So we're not just out there solely studying space, but we have all those satellites that Jessica showed earlier that are looking back at the Earth and collecting data on it. And so they're collecting measurements as they orbit. And once we receive these measurements, that data gets sent to specific data centers where it's stored, and then NASA publishes it so that anyone can download it. And what we do with that data on the MyNASA Data Project is we develop lessons and other resources for your teachers to help teach students like yourselves so that you can learn about the different characteristics of the Earth and how they are related to each other. And so more specifically, what I do is I make a lot of maps of these NASA satellite data to feature in our resources. And so in this example here, this is an example of temperature data. So the red areas on the map are where the temperature is higher near the equator. And then the areas that are blue in the North Pole and South Pole, those are areas where the temperature is cooler. And so this map actually comes from NASA data that was collected. And what I do is I actually make these maps using a software on my computer that allows me to plot the data and apply color to the range of values so that we can see it visually like this. And this process, it's called Geographic Information Science, or GIS for short. And then next slide, please. And I just want to reiterate how important this NASA data is. So how are the data used? Well, so one way is to just determine how different parts of the Earth system interacts with each other or how they change one another. So for instance, how does the atmosphere interact with the Earth's surface, its vegetation, ice? How are all these things connected? But then we can also study how the characteristics of the Earth change over time. We can study those patterns, and we can use all of this information to make predictions. And then this way, we can continue to learn new things in science and teach others, as we try to do on the MyNASA data team. Next slide. All right, and so last of all, here's just a slide with some of the things that I found really helped me to get into the career I have now. The first thing is I felt like I needed a strong foundation in math and science, but as I talked about earlier, this wasn't always easy, and I didn't always enjoy all of my classes. but I did not give up because I was very focused on reaching my long-term goals. So my advice for you there is to think about your long-term goals and just always have them in your mind and motivating you as you encounter, challenges like that along the way, because many of us have had those. And then second, I did challenge myself. Again, part of this is not giving up when you encounter difficulties. But another part of this too, I think, is taking risks. You'll never know if you like something until you try it. You'll never know if you'll win a competition or get an internship or a job if you never apply in the first place. So definitely challenge yourself to try new things, become a part of different organizations, groups, and apply for those jobs and internships because it could always open up new opportunities for you. And then I also found something that helped when preparing for my career is to choose to study things that you're interested in or passionate about. Because if you already enjoy learning about the subject, it'll be very easy to become an expert over time and to continue learning as you grow older in your college education. And lastly, do not be afraid to ask for help when you need it. If there's something in school that you don't understand, or any kind of challenge you encounter that you need advice, it is always okay to ask your teachers, your parents, or even your friends and other classmates for help. And I think you'll find that most people really do want you to succeed and will be happy to help you. Right. And that's all I had, so I'll pass it over to Angie.
Thank you, Desiree. So I just want to share a couple of resources here to help you learn a little bit more about different NASA careers. You've heard of a couple already, a scientist and a scientific programmer, and then Kevin's doing a different kind of programming. So we have a neat website that shows where from all over the world different NASA people are from, which is a good thing because you can see that you can be from anywhere and be successful. And then we have this NASA People website, which has lots of different people and you can learn bits about their careers and what they do and a little bit about some of their stories. And then on the next slide, please, and I will be sharing these links out with you guys. I wanted to talk about some of the internship resources for NASA. So as Desiree mentioned, an internship is kind of like a short-term job, and most of the NASA internships are for college students. There are a few for high school students, but most of them are for college students. There is a program called the SEAS Summer High School Internship Program, and there's a link here. And that is for high school students specifically. Of course, it's already been, the selections have been made for this summer, but it may be something that if you're not in high school yet, you might want to save this and look into it, or if you have a couple years left, you could look into this for next summer. The NASA internship program there is at intern.nasa.gov, and you can go out there and see what's there. The biggest piece of advice I will give you on that is that you want to be thinking at least 6 months ahead. So all of the jobs for this summer were posted back in like December and January. So you want to be thinking ahead and looking ahead, and go ahead and apply, because Jessica likes to say, and I'll say it, that someone's going to get it. So you might as well apply because it might be you. And the other thing is, once you kind of get everything out into the system, it's easier to apply again And as you see, like with Kevin, sometimes people come back for more than one internship. There's another program called Develop, which is with the Applied Science group at NASA. And that's a really neat program where they take people from different backgrounds and they use NASA data to try to solve some kind of societal issue or inform a societal issue. So they're working on real world problems, and they like to have teams of people from all different backgrounds. You do need to be 16 years old to intern at NASA, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my path to NASA because there's a moral to my story. So fun facts about myself is that I went to 11 schools before I graduated from high school. So if you do the math, that's almost one school per year because I moved around a lot and my father was not in the military. That's the question that I always get, but no, he wasn't. I do really like to play board games and cook and read, and I like to travel. And so one of the things I like to do is like try to learn to cook food from places that I travel or read about places that I travel. So that's really fun. And I suspect that the reason I like to travel a lot is because I did it so much as a young person. So next slide, please. So my junior year in high school, Sally Ride became the first woman to go into space, and that really inspired me. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I really wanted to work at NASA. And I also kind of really wanted to be a teacher. So I went to Purdue University and I was majoring in science, and I wanted to be a science teacher, but I also wanted to work at NASA. And I didn't know how that was going to work, but those were two things I really wanted to do. So I took chemistry first semester and I got a B. And I was a very successful high school student. And so this was the first B I had ever gotten. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I'm saying that because I did not handle this very well. Next slide, please. When I got that B, I felt like the sheep here or the little lamb here in this picture, and I convinced myself that I was not smart enough to study science, which is negative self-talk. And I also told this to myself, but I did not share this with anybody. So I didn't tell my academic advisor I felt that way. I didn't tell my parents I felt that way. Didn't tell my friends I felt that way. I kept it all inside. I did not ask for help like Desiree suggested. Next slide, please. I really think if I had told some people how I felt, that this is the message I would have gotten. I mean, looking back on it now, that was very much of a fixed mindset, not a growth mindset, if you're familiar with those terms. And I really know that if someone came to me and said, oh, I got a B, I would say, that's just fine. Keep going, right? You can do this. But nevertheless, next slide, please. I changed my major. And I changed my major and I ended up going into information technology. And I did computer programming and information technology for about 12 years. But then I made a switch and I switched over to teaching. And I started out teaching math, then I went into teaching science. And so remember, I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to work at NASA. I did a summer program with NASA just because I was interested in it for teachers. And out of that, I ultimately ended up applying for an internship and getting an internship at NASA. Yes, teachers can be interns at NASA. And the things that I learned were about these citizen participatory science programs, which I took back and I used with my students, and it was really effective. They really liked it. They did really well. I really liked it. I enjoyed doing the science so much, even though it was, I wasn't a professional scientist. I was doing some citizen science, and I ended up in the role that I have now, which is basically on an education team for NASA, right? Not a job I could have imagined back in high school, but ultimately, I feel like my dreams really came true. But the moral of my story is to support what the other people are saying, that have confidence in yourself, work hard, and ask for help. And if you are feeling frustrated or defeated, please share that with someone, because it really may not be as bad as you think. So my path was long and winding, but I ended up there, and I had a good time along the way. But I think I could have gotten there more quickly if I had been a little more honest with myself. So next slide, please. As you move forward, and if you want to continue to engage with NASA, you can follow the NASA news at www.nasa.gov. You can engage in citizen science with NASA. You can learn about those careers that we talked about, and we encourage you to apply for internships. And I believe that that is the last slide, and we can open it up for questions after a final congratulations, because we're proud of you, and hope that you continue to want to do work around Earth as a system. I did see one question earlier in the chat, noticing the Tibet anomaly in the image that Desiree shared, and that is very interesting. So if you have questions now, I know early someone asked about GIS, and I feel certain that Desiree would have answered that. Someone did ask if we were working on any space explorations right now. NASA is. I would say that we personally are not on our team, because we are in the science directorate, and we work on Earth science. Oh, what software is Desiree using?
So I use ArcGIS Pro, but I also use QGIS. And so QGIS is completely free. And if you have interest in GIS, there's a ton of free training tutorials online. So I like both. I think they're both really great programs, ArcGIS and QGIS, that can accomplish everything you need to do if you're interested in GIS. Definitely check those out.
So Felix says that's their intended major. That's great. It's very useful. Anything else?
As we're waiting for a few more questions to come in, I wanted to remind you that participating in the science fair and receiving this award is something to be really proud of. And if you are applying to some of these internship programs, to feel free to include that in your application. So that is one thing that might help you stand out above somebody else who's applying, is to see that not just that you have an interest in NASA, but that you've gone the extra step and actually done an investigation and won this award. And if any of you have actually used any NASA data, be sure to include that as well in your application.
So there's a question in the Q&A. I think, Kevin, this would be a good one for you. How can I start to learn computer programming such as Python?
So the way I learned was through a book. I think it was called Python for Dummies. Not 100% sure. But most of the kind of like intro Python books would be fairly standard and kind of give you the basics of kind of like Python or any language. And then just one thing I want to iterate with like starting to learn computer programming is that you might hear people debate, oh, you should learn this language, you should learn that language. From my experience, kind of once you learn one language, they're all fairly similar. The words might be different, but kind of the logic behind all the languages are basically the same. So once you kind of get into that mindset, it's easy to just switch over. So yeah, I learned through a book, and I think that worked just out fine.
This is a great question. What is one class or competition that you have done or taken that you feel really helped you get where you are today?
For me, so I'll give, for me, I'd say it was calculus in high school, just because calculus was kind of the first time that I realized, hey, I like this math thing. Like I think that was my junior year of high school, and before then I had taken math, gone through it, but kind of calculus is finally where I realized, hey, I kind of like math. And then kind of through that, I was like, computer programming is like not, it's different than math, but kind of has some of the same logic behind it. So like maybe I'll explore that. So just, I'd say for me, kind of just taking calculus and then following my interest after that kind of got me where I am today.
One thing I'd recommend if you're going into like, well, any kind of science, I would recommend an introductory coding class just because it's been really helpful to me throughout my career, and it kind of led me down a path to working more with technology. I find that a lot of scientists will they're not super great at programming, but they use coding languages like Python to run scripts to access data or to do some calculations on data sets. And I think that skill is really helpful in science, even to just know a little bit of some language, just so you know the basics, and you can learn more from there if you're interested or you need code to accomplish a task. So I would say that. And then as for competitions, I did enter in science fairs at my school and college. A couple years, I think 2 out of the 4 years, I entered in our science fair. And it was rewarding because getting feedback on your projects really helped. And as a senior, I had to do a thesis, like a capstone project. So entering in competitions and science fairs earlier on and going through a research project experience and getting feedback from experts was really valuable in preparing me for my final graded project to end out my college education. So recommend those two.
So I will echo Kevin's calculus class. I did take calculus in high school, and I did really well in it. And then when I got to college, you had to take a math placement test. And it turns out I did really bad on it. And I was really bitter about it for a while, that I was like, I'm not even taking math at Florida State. And so I was told that I needed to retake calculus, even though I got A's in it. And I actually took calculus at my local community college, and I am so grateful that I did that. Florida State's a very large school. Calculus is a very large class. Community college was a real small class, and I felt like taking that a second-ish time was really powerful for me, and being able to really understand calculus. And I think just because I got lucky with my teacher in the community college setting, that I just understood it really, really well. And then the other part was I also took physics in high school, and then that you're required to take it anyways in college, and particularly in the atmospheric sciences. A really strong background in physics is an absolute must. If you're thinking on the meteorology, those applied science pathways, physics is another really important one. But like I said, even if it turns out you don't do well the first time or you don't test well, there are always more chances, so keep pursuing it.
So my answer might be a little different. I'm not going to name a specific class, but what I'm going to say is that turns out that the hardest classes that I took are the ones that helped me get where I am today, because I learned how to work hard and how to apply myself and keep trying, and probably work with other people, because that's a really important thing at NASA too. And when those classes were really hard for me, turns out I would try to find some study partners, even if we didn't have to do group work in the class. And I feel like those things, while they were hard at the time, are the classes that gave me the skills that I need. Because one of the things about college is that really when you go to college, you're learning content, but if you're interested in science and you want to discover new things, turns out it's not already in a textbook. And so what you're really learning in college is how to keep learning, how to be a lifelong learner, and how to work on things. And so that's what I would say is the hardest classes were and then for competitions or things, I would say anything where you have to work in a group is very valuable, because nobody works alone at NASA. And in probably most jobs, most people don't work alone. So there's another question here about, do we speak a lot of German and Russian? My teacher said astronauts have to speak one of those two languages. I did take a lot of Russian in college, but I do not have to speak it for my job at NASA.
And I can't say for certain whether or not astronauts have any requirement for other languages, although there are often many other countries represented on the International Space Station, and so being able to interact with others in another language is probably really important. But in what we do, we're typically, I don't think I've had to do anything in Russian or German lately.
How many science classes did you have to take in high school to get where you are right now?
So one thing that's interesting about that question is that requirements for high school science vary widely from state to state. And so what I would suggest is to, as much as possible, take a science every year of high school. And so that is not necessarily required at all states, is 4 years of science, but whenever possible, I would recommend to do that.
And the more science you take, the more you see connections between the different topics, even though you may not think there are a whole lot of connections. So there's someone asking for our email if they have further NASA related questions in the near future.
Yeah, we'll be sending out the link with
Yes.
all of the URLs to the websites that we talked about today. And so we'll also include the emails in there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm just giving it another minute to see if another question comes in. And while you guys are thinking, if you have another question, I just really want to congratulate you again and remind you that it is the NASA Earth System Science Project Award. And so that touches back a little on what I was just saying a minute ago about how there are a lot of connections between a lot of different things. And so it's a great thing to focus on. What's the most interesting thing you've seen while looking around the Earth? Whew.
So I'll share something. In atmospheric science and in other earth science, we refer to something called microclimates. And that is, in other words, that let's say it's your city, you're talking about the climate of your city, but a microclimate might be that in one part of the city looks like it has a different climate than another part. And that is something that we talk a lot about and try to address in earth science, because from a satellite perspective, it's really hard to get that fine level of detail. And so that's the sort of technology that we continue to work on in earth sciences, to be able to get that granularity of detail from space, to be able to, instead of just saying, oh, the temperature in this city, all of the city is this one temperature, but actually being able to look almost from block to block to be able to see those subtle differences. And learning about microclimates and what actually impacts the temperature of your local community has been really interesting to me. That was something that I didn't really know about growing up, but makes a lot of sense now that I think about it as a scientist researching it and asking communities to share that sort of information back to us at NASA.
So there's an excellent question here. What advice would you give to a minority female pursuing a STEM-based career predominated by men facing adversities?
Get yourself some mentors. This is my number one recommendation for anyone, but particularly for those of us who are not as well represented in science, technology, engineering, or math, is to make sure you build yourself out a support network. And so I'm using the mentor term here loosely, but start thinking about who is your support network. As Desiree shared and as Kevin shared, not everything is easy as you're going through college in your classes. Sometimes you stumble, and you need to have a support network to help you through that. So those can be peers, they can be family members, and then as you're moving through college into career, try to get some that are related to your field, either in the organization that you want to work in, to be able to do that. And that, I feel like, is the number one way to help you get through those hard times, is that support network. Another place you can find that support network is also with professional societies. So there are actually a number of professional societies that have local chapters that are open to students, students younger than college. So middle and high school students in the community can join. And when I say professional societies, these are things like, for me, I'm a member of American Meteorological Society because I am a meteorologist. American Geophysical Union is a big one at NASA that most earth scientists are a part of, AGU, American Geophysical Union. And so if you look for professional societies, that can be a really good way to help build that network for yourself of people related to your field that can be your support when times are hard.
There's a question here. I see one. I will come back to it, but what are some colleges and universities and majors that you would recommend for further study of Earth systems to work at NASA eventually?
I don't have any particular colleges, but in terms of fields of study, anything, I think you kind of have options of going a GIS type track is heavily popular, and GIS in general, like Desiree was talking about, applications of that are really important in earth science. Physics is another really big one. And then you could go into specific applied physics within that, like atmospheric sciences, different fields related to oceanography, geology, but making sure that you at least can maintain some of that physics background is as well important, I think.
So there's a question if we have live stream cameras on the weather satellites that they can view.
So NASA does not operate any of the current weather satellites. NOAA operates most of our weather satellites, and our weather satellites are geostationary satellites. And so they're the satellites that are in a location in space where they are going to follow the Earth at sort of the same turning. So if the Earth is going, the stationary above the geographic point is where it is. And those are our weather satellites that we're able to then see changes that are happening all day long. And so if you search for geostationary satellite, geostationary weather satellite, you can find various feeds from our partners at NOAA who maintain that record and make that publicly available.
And then there's a question, have you seen any exotic forms of lightning?
Exotic forms of lightning. I love all forms of lightning to see. In fact, the other day, I was very sad when I first moved to Virginia. There was no lightning for a year, and it was the weirdest experience for me being from Tampa, where there are thunderstorms in Florida all the time. I didn't know what to do with myself moving to Virginia and not experiencing any thunderstorms. Then we got back into a normal swing of things. And in fact, the other evening, we had a very large thunderstorm where there was lightning, about at least one a minute. And most of it was cloud to cloud. You could tell from the colors of the sky. And so to me, the best part is the different colors in the sky. So the purples are my favorite color in the sky that the lightning make. Does anyone else have any favorite lightning or atmospheric phenomenon that you get to see now?
I just last weekend was on the top of a mountain and sitting around in the evening, we were sitting out there to watch the sunset. It had long set, and there were thunderstorms and lightning all around us, 365 degrees, and we had no storm where we were. That was cool. So, I was just like, is there a hole in this storm, or are we up above it? I wasn't quite sure, but that was really neat because no matter which way I turned, I had a light show, and it never came. So there's another question here. Is there a section in NASA that focuses on studying Earth oceanography? The short answer is yes.
Absolutely. Desiree, you've worked with some ocean data before, right?
Yeah, so from the data perspective, if you're interested in like remote sensing and data collection, we look a lot at like ocean bathymetry, like the seafloor and the different sediments that exist. And so there are opportunities there to study the different samples in oceanography and even some of the life that lives in the oceans, like phytoplankton and temperature, sea level height, all sorts of data is collected on the ocean.
You know, Angie, when we send out the list of links that might be popular, we maybe want to add Earth Observatory.
Okay.
Because that's a great way to get NASA news, specifically in Earth sciences. And so you could Google right now, NASA Earth Observatory. And I think they do a great job of writing articles for the public, all with recent NASA data. So they take NASA recent data images, interesting things that are happening around the world. So for example, when there's a volcanic eruption or new data has just come out about the ocean, it gets posted to NASA Earth Observatory as well. And that would probably be a great place to start looking at some of these different research areas that you might be interested in as well. So I see we're just over 8 o'clock. Angie, are there any more questions in the chat? We can probably do one if there's still one out there.
I don't see any more in the chat or the Q&A. But thank you everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you on behalf of NASA. We're so proud and excited for you.
Yes. Keep up the good work.